Gangbao, and technical support to the African Confederation of Small-Scale Fishing Professional Organizations, CAOPA, and CAOPA required me to facilitate this meeting. We have different panelists today who are already online hereby ready, and we would like to call to mind that this webinar is translated into we have a simultaneous interpretation in various languages, in English, and in Spanish, and Portuguese. As a result, we would like to request you to take all the measures to be able to access the rightful channel to be able to access the interpretation. We would like also to ask to all our speakers to abide by the time frame that has been proposed, a presentation of 7 minutes, and to answer to the various questions to be asked. After the 4 interventions, we are going to collect some questions and then comments in a very limited way, but in also a very balanced way to enable the ones and others to be able to have a word. On this, we would like to ask the chairperson of CAOPA, Mr. Gosbey, to proceed, have a small introduction before we start fully diving into the webinar by giving the floor to, first of all, to Mr. Dauda Sen, the Secretary General, and to Madam Amigay and Dr. Simanawa Rati Ober, His Excellency Mr. the Minister of the Blue Economy, Fisheries and Blue Economy from Madagascar, who is already online. Your Excellency, welcome, and Madam Lena Wetland from FAO. I will come back to the presentations right now by introducing them. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. President, the floor is all yours for your intervention, your introduction. Thank you very much, Mr. Facilitator. First of all, I would like to thank all the participants, ladies and gentlemen, for having joined us to this webinar. And Your Excellency, His Excellency, Mr. the Minister of Fisheries and Blue Economy of Madagascar, dear participants, again, the voluntary guidelines to ensure the sustainability of small-scale fisheries in the context of food security and poverty eradication adopted in 2014 are very important to giving our African small-scale fishing communities a bright future. African Confederation of Professional Organizations of Small-Scale Fisheries, CAOPA, has wanted to organize this webinar to share the success stories and the challenges encountered in implementing these voluntary guidelines at the level of African countries over the decades. There is no doubt that since their adoption, the guidelines have influenced the national policies and the regional policies of many African countries, which have set in place action plans to support small-scale fishing, for instance, in Tanzania, in Madagascar, in Namibia, and in Senegal, and in Malawi. But many of the challenges remain to be overcome. There is still a major issue of ownership of these VG voluntary guidelines, both at the level of the fishermen and decision makers. Still, too many African fishermen and women are unaware of the guidelines and don't know how they can be used to improve their living conditions. Still, too many African governments are just content themselves with declarations concerning the implementation of these guidelines without putting in place proactive policies for the benefit of their populations. On the other hand, there is still a great deal of work to be done to better articulate the voluntary guidelines for sustainable scale fishing are better coordinated with other international tools and commitments made by countries like guidelines on land tenure or the 188 ILO Convention on the works in the fishery sector. Ladies and gentlemen, dear participants, the FAO has done a great deal of work in the implementation of these programs. However, to ensure the sustainability of this work and build the capacities of the professionals and governments, CAOPA is committed to continue its collaboration with the FAO Africa Regional Office. Together, we will continue to work toward better implementation of the SSF guidelines, ensuring that the fishing community is to be involved in the decision-making process and to benefit adequate support to improve their livelihoods. CAOPA reiterates its commitment to work in favor of Africa artisanal fisheries stakeholders. We reiterate our determination to popularize the SSF guidelines, which provide a framework for the sustainable management of fisheries resources. In the 2 hour of webinar that we have set for ourselves via testimonies, and we'll have this opportunity to discuss these aspects and then others. Of 10 years after the adoption, we can see a vision that is clear and a way to go to ensure a brighter future of a sustainable fisheries in Africa. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for your very rapt attention. Thank you so much, Mr. President, and for this very interesting and introductive, giving us the background of the voluntary guidelines. It updated in 20 and their baselines, their roots, the code of conduct, and of 1995, and this code of conduct will be celebrating its 10 years of anniversary in 1 year time, inshallah. And of course, as you said, Mr. President, you have drawn the attention and despite all the effort made by FAO, CAOPA, the various institutions, only a couple of countries have adopted an action plan. We have Madagascar, Namibia, Senegal, Tanzania, and Malawi. These are the 5 countries having. It means that the number of the countries is very, very limited compared to the potential of the voluntary guidelines. Without any further ado, would like to ask Dauda Sen, who is the current Secretary General of CAOPA, and to Dauda, he is a fisherman, he is a professional, and he is from the Gambia. And we are going to ask Dauda to give us a presentation and for 7 minutes. Dauda, the floor is all yours, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Moderator, and thank you all the participants present here. I would say good afternoon to everyone and welcome everyone to this unique and historic webinar. I say it's historic because given the nature of the small-scale fisheries guideline and CAOPA's enormous effort in ensuring that these guidelines are communicated thoroughly to all responsible small-scale fishers and even beyond. Special recognition and deep appreciation to my fellow honorable panelists. Thank you all for your outstanding efforts in ensuring that small-scale fishers are always on the spotlight. But by way of introduction, I think the moderator has already introduced me, so I don't need to go back to that. But my talk here will focus on CAOPA's activities relative to the implementation of the small-scale fisheries guideline, as well as the challenges CAOPA has organized several activities. Amongst them, these are seminars held in Senegal, Guinea, the Gambia, Cote d'Ivoire, and Ghana. And also, CAOPA has also come up with a youth wing, because having in cognizance of the future generation, the youth, CAOPA has already created or established a youth wing who are now being trained as far as fisheries and fisheries issues are concerned, to be able to take the baton of responsibility. So this is a very great initiative that has been done by CAOPA. CAOPA has also trained actors in Senegal around the Saloum area with the Coastal Fisheries Initiative, the West African component, about the guidelines. In general, CAOPA have conducted and continue to raise awareness on the need for small-scale fisheries to take ownership of this document. Because if you look at the name of the title of the document, it says small-scale fisheries. Therefore, this is ours. The document is our office, is our income, is our everything. So as far as small-scale fisheries are concerned, we should be in the forefront to ensure that these guidelines are implemented fully. CAOPA has also produced an easy to read and easy to understand two-page guide for trainers on the small-scale fisheries guidelines and land tenure, and has trained fishing association and community radios about the guidelines. So involvement of community radios is very, very crucial, because this is where everything goes out in viral, and then everyone will be able to get that. And on the basis of the above, a network of fishers and community radio stations are now capable and actively engaged in disseminating the content of the guideline, thus geared towards encouraging responsible fisheries practitioners, because the guidelines is more or less talking about how responsible should we be in the area of ensuring that fisheries or fishing is conducted in a responsible manner. So this guideline, this achievement would not have come through without the effective collaboration and support by government, fishers, local, regional, and international organizations. Most prominent is CAOPA. CAOPA is the continental friend of fishers. CAOPA is a continental organization whose day-to-day activities is geared towards ensuring that fishers' plight is put at the forefront at the international level, regional level, and even sub-regional level. But despite these breakthroughs, I think there are challenges or issues in respect to the implementation of the guidelines, and one of them is about data and monitoring. We have data is very, very deficient, and a significant challenge lies in the lack of comprehensive data and monitoring system for small-scale fisheries. And without accurate information, it becomes difficult to assess the impact of policies and interventions. This is one of the challenges. The second challenge or the issue is engagement of small-scale fisheries. Meaningful involvement of small-scale fisheries in planning and policy formulation remains an obstacle. Effective approaches are needed then to engage these stakeholders and ensure their perspective are considered. Another aspect of the issue is also about inclusion of traditional and local knowledge. Many a times we do focus on scientific knowledge, forgetting about the knowledge that the fishermen have. So it is important that we include the knowledge. And the SSF, the Small Scale Fisheries Guideline, emphasize the importance of traditional and local knowledge. However, its integration into management practices is often insufficient, hindering effective implementation. And the other aspect, as far as issues are concerned, is the legal and policy frameworks. Is also an issue as far as or challenges in the implementation of the guidelines. Their existing legal and policy frameworks may not align well with the principles underlying small-scale fisheries guidelines. So strengthening this alignment is essential to facilitate implementation. And when it comes to governance, is just my last point, governance is very, very important. Governance capacity. There is a problem or issues in respect to governance capacity. Building governance capacity at various levels is crucial. States and non-state actors need the skills and resources to support small-scale fisheries implementation effectively. So when we talk about governance, here we're going to look at the three-layer governance regime. We look at the local governance system, we look at the state governance system, and then we look at the global governance. So if the implementation of these guidelines should be effective, I think we need to take into account or consideration these three governance layers. So without much to say, thank you very much. I will end here and thank everyone for your kind attention. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Andauda Sen. Before moving on to the next speaker, would you kind to come back to the efforts and the efforts that have been made by CAOPA to promote the voluntary guidelines in line with the call to action? Can you come back to that, Dauda? Because CAOPA has launched the call to action and disseminated with the partners. And can you tell us more? We would like to have furthermore on what CAOPA has been able to do and or what CAOPA is planning to do in the development relationship of the voluntary guidelines in line with the call to action. Over to you, SG.
Yeah, I think, thank you very much. I think when you look at the guidelines and the CAOPA call to action, the CAOPA call to action are five key, very precise and rich points. And the one point is about engagement participation. Another point is about the blue economy. The other one talks about climate change. So looking at the guideline, the CAOPA has just made a summary of the whole guideline into a 5-point strategic approach. So this has been presented in Rome all over the world, and then everyone is now aware that CAOPA has a 5-point, not even CAOPA, but even at the Latin American level, they've supported it. Everywhere, CAOPA has really shared this document, and the document is there for everyone to see. But when it comes to the climate issues, the impact of climate change, I think these are impacts that are really hurting small-scale fishers. They are being displaced. There is no compensation mechanism. Likewise, the emergence discourse about the blue economy or the blue growth, which are all impacting on these small-scale fisheries. And then when it comes to competing with them, with these big extractive industries, CAOPA has made it clear that it cannot compete. So this blue economy has to be revisited, and fisherfolks or fishermen be at the center stage of the blue economy, because they talk about inclusive blue economy. But as far as CAOPA is concerned, we see it as an exclusive blue. Okay. Thank you. I think there has been an interruption there. I don't know.
Go ahead, SG.
Donc, merci Daouda pour ces...
Thank you so much, Dauda, for these precisions. And I would like to recall to the minds that Dauda is a stakeholder and it's important. And what he has just shared are very precise, concrete actions on the ground carried out by CAOPA, be it the seminars, and also the importance that CAOPA has given to the youth for cell. And after having established a youth cell and built their capacities on the voluntary guidelines, the sensitization to the stakeholders, and different case studies that have been carried out. And Mr. Daudasen has recalled to the minds. In addition to that, CAOPA, according to Dauda, has gone further by producing a simplified version of the voluntary guidelines for a better dissemination, namely via the network of the community radios. And despite all of this, we have challenges that have been overcome. We have the data management, the monitoring M&E system, the inclusion of traditional knowledge, the legal framework, etc., etc. And Mr. Daudasen has concluded by by recalling to the minds that the close relationship between the call to action and its conclusion. Even if you speak about blue economy, the fishermen, must be at the heart of the blue economy. And I think that this is a strong message, a very important message. And I would like to ask the people who have just joined us to follow according to the channels, interpretation channels of the. We have Spanish, we have Portuguese, we have French, and we have English. So we are going to move on to our second speaker, and her name is Madame Amigay from the Maritime Fisheries Department.
Bonjour tout le monde.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
Bonjour, allô? Vous m'entendez, Monsieur Mbok?
Oui, nous vous entendons.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We can hear you. Very sorry, I mean Jamniajo, and the line is not well. Madam Gay John, and head of professional organization supporting department. I am a coordinator of the voluntary guideline project on sustainable small-scale fisheries. And first of all, I am very delighted to be among the panelists of this great, important thematic. In nutshell, the implementation, the voluntary guidelines implementation project will target to strengthening the building capacities on development, local development according to national orientations, to draft social development policies in Senegal. And to achieve that one, it was all about supporting the sustainable development of this small-scale fisheries sector by relying on the voluntary guidelines of small-scale fisheries via an improvement of aquatic habitats and improvement of resource management systems via the capacity buildings and supporting and coordinating the women organizations and youth groupings regarding the mainstreaming of the gender issues upon these three targeted outcomes, namely the resilience, strengthening of ecosystems for the improvement of habitats, the promotion of good governance, good practices of water resources, support brought to fisheries with a gender-based approach by focusing on the women's and youth organizations. These two first outcomes have been achieved, fulfilled with the development and the implementation of the Sangoma marine protected area, and support have been brought about to the stakeholders to enable them to carry out activities, right, and monitoring M&E and surveillance and for the respects and the implementation of management measures. And in that way, we organize 9 outings and 3 outings in the An region. And support have been brought about via the production of plans on species, important species. I mean, the species that have high value, high trade value, right? Senegal, the content of the voluntary guidelines has been translated in the national language of Wolof, edited, shared with the shareholders for a better ownership of the communities of this international instrument exclusively dedicated to the small-scale fishing. Radio broadcastings have been organized in the large areas to deal with current issues and thematics and to come up with solutions and also to better disseminate the voluntary guidelines on small-scale fisheries. The community-based radios remain a very important element to reach out to the communities, right? That's why this is the reason why we have collaborations with the radios on the dissemination of voluntary guidelines. When it comes to the support brought to given provided to the women and youth, sensitization activities on the importance of mangroves have been organized. An activity of 6 days, ecological eco outings in the Sangoma area for the content of women and youth and groupings and new Joa women groupings have been involved. The project funded the identification mission of income generating activities, in line with the coastal shrimp fisheries activities. It also funded the eco and benefits analysis of value chains of oysters and coastal shrimps in the Salom Islands. And training workshops have been organized in the framework of the dissemination of the validation of income generating activities, goods and bad practices in processing in the Fatick region. Mm, the when we stock taking of the implementation of the voluntary guidelines and the stock taking, the satisfaction points are to be shared, namely the opportunity given to the various stakeholders and via these projects and to come together and to discuss two issues of the artisanal subsector. The department, maritime department, has decided to take up an act, prefect act, to implement and manage activities of the project have been able to meet the need of the Salon women. In fact, these latters have wished to organize participatory activities to have more information on the act movement that has been achieved thanks to the implementation of the activities of the project. Disseminated leaflets designed in the framework of the project are still found in all the technical services and the facilities of small-scale fishing communities. The main failure is the lack of census of the active stakeholders. Attempts of collaborations have been taken up with another project of FAO, the IPC project, to complement the budget. But at the end of the day, for procedural issues and the challenge is to raise enough funds, the census have not been able to be done. The project that had a national scope happened only on three main maritime areas, in Dakar, in Fatick, and in Chess. The obstacles have been administrative and context-based. We had COVID in the past. We've our former with Kume. We had also for the first time we have lived some very delayed in complicated procedures, administrative procedures of FAO. We've learned, and that's really delayed the making the disbursement of the funds, and also over delays in the administration that has delayed the implementation of the activities on the ground. When it comes to the carrying on of implementation of voluntary guidelines, we need to review the logistic means of the project. A project that has a national ambition must move on the terrain, on the land with its own means. And we need to review the financial amounts and also to be able to help the beneficiaries. It is important also to relaunch, to census and to take stock of the projects, and in the thematics of voluntary guidelines to develop synergies, not to scatter our efforts and not to step on the steps of others. Maritime important regions have benefited from the implementation of the voluntary guidelines. Meetings of platforms bringing together the different stakeholders have been organized to inform the level of implementation of the activities in the project. It is but we still have a long way to go to increase the involvement level of the shareholders. And organizing also broadcasting, and also, but we're still noticing that we still have a long way to go to involve enough people. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for your very lovely attention. Over to you, Mr. Facilitator.
Merci, Madame
Thank
Gay.
you so much, Madame Gay. Thank you so much. And I think that CAOPA forward to give you beyond your role and responsibility at the level of the Fishery Directorate and also the level of the project. And to speak about a concrete project, and that is drafted via the based on the voluntary guidelines, because President in his introduction said that only 5 countries have been able to develop action plans, and CAOPA thought to be useful during this webinar that we have an example to be given by a country that has been able to implement an action plan, a project. So we have taken good note of the different outcomes that you have been able to register and the different impediments that you have encountered. But essentially speaking, the obstacle that is shared by everybody is the delay, administrative delays, and very complicated procedures of resources, and also the needs in additional resources to be able to reach out to the other communities and to fulfill the targeted outcomes, and projects that had to have a national scope or stopped only at 3 regions. And on these words, the answers, questions, and queries will help us to better draw all the lessons. Ladies and gentlemen, let's move on to the third panelist, Madam Lena Westland. I would like to ask you to, in introduction. I'm sorry, in terms of order, I'm sorry, Your Excellency, it's your turn now. His Excellency, Mr. Martin Chimanao Rati Ober, Minister of Fisheries and Blue Economy of Madagascar. Your Excellency, the people who are used to the webinars of CAOPA and to the meetings of CAOPA do know you, and I used to have you on the at the overhands during the workshops, despite your very tight schedule, despite the distance, yeah, and you all the time that is necessary, you have been available to bring about your contribution, and as an authority in a country, as a biologist by training, and oceanographer and applied sciences, and but as a stakeholder, right, in the civil society of Madagascar, and before being appointed as a Minister of Fisheries and Blue Economy. It's really a great pleasure, Your Excellency, that this webinar is saying welcome to you among us, and the floor is all yours, yeah, to share with us your experience of based on your country. Your Excellency, the floor is all yours. Thank you so much, Mr. President. Good evening to all of you. I am speaking from Mantanariva. It is already night time. I'm sorry, I am in the bus, and I'm doing this intervention via my car, and because we are on the way to join the office after having participated in all the meetings. Dear friends of small-scale fisheries, I would like to wish you a very happy happy anniversary of the voluntary guidelines, and 10 years is a long day, and also drawing a lot of lessons via the implementation, yeah, and of these voluntary guidelines in our country. So my intervention will be articulated, yeah, on 3 areas, and I will be speaking of these voluntary guidelines we have implemented in Madagascar, and secondly, the different challenges to which we have encountered, and third, the solutions and the recommendations that can help us and help other countries that have not been able to implement these voluntary guidelines in their various countries. Why the voluntary guidelines of small-scale fisheries? Why? These are voluntary guidelines that are pushing us to acknowledge the role of the small-scale fisheries, as well as in ensuring food security, creating employment, and alleviating poverty. These voluntary guidelines are striving based on the premise that nobody is to be left behind. This is a human rights based approach, and this is the ideal approach to manage the small-scale fisheries within a country. reason why it is a governance tool that is ideal and for the management of small-scale fisheries. So we have decided in Madagascar and to implement them because I personally, as I was part of major stakeholders, civil society, we are working within fisheries and aquaculture. I am personally convinced of the the importance of these guidelines, speaking about transparency, equity, accountability, and name it because the thirteen principles are very rich to improve the governance within a country. What are the major challenges? The challenges that we have encountered in Madagascar. We have encountered a bunch of resistance, be it internally or externally, among the colleagues themselves. My colleagues, we have a kind of resistance regarding to the opening, right? And of course, we have explained to these people the importance of the voluntary guidelines. And finally, they were convinced that the couple of weeks after being appointed in August 2021, we have contacted the initiative for fisheries transparency, FITI, and to be the fifth country as a candidate or member of the initiative, the FITI initiative for fisheries transparency. In addition to that, we have established the cluster, the blue economy cluster, that brings together all the stakeholders working in blue economy, namely the fishing folks. Following that one, we have established a kind of consultation framework or meetings, regular meetings with all the stakeholders to discuss on the updating on updating the governance tools and strategies and the development of the national plan for small-scale fisheries and in Madagascar and with the support of FAO. This national plan has been validated October 2023, and we are in the implementation of the national plan as we stand now. This national plan that highlights the role that the small-scale fisheries is taking up in Madagascar. I would like to pinpoint that 67% of the fisheries products are from the small-scale fisheries, 67%. So we cannot ignore the small-scale fisheries. That's why I'm speaking from time to time. In Madagascar, the fisheries is livelihood fisheries. It means that we are fishing to meet our needs, to meet the needs of the population. And we have that one, first of all. What happened also is that because we have established a structure that is that enables to bring about transparency, giving space, opportunities to all the stakeholders to express themselves and to propose, to move forward ideas to be able to improve this fisheries sector in Madagascar. We have had the trust, we won the trust of the stakeholders, the FAO name, and also the USAID. We have also the UNDP, not also the World Bank, the ADB. It's a whole bunch of stakeholders. The ABIRA, name them because the list is in existence. The European Union is part of that as well. So all of this, just to tell you that by implementing the voluntary guidelines of the small-scale fisheries of FAO, we have won the trust of all the stakeholders, guys, and even the stakeholders at the national level. That's why Madagascar today, we hear less and less requests regarding the attribution of fisheries permits because for 2 years now, the permits are published. Everybody knows them. Everybody sees them. And for 1 year now, we have been able to produce the first report TDI. It's a report that is very rich, that gives out the situation analysis, the state of fisheries, state and the resources, the economy of the country, and so on and so forth. The major challenges that we are encountering, ladies and gentlemen, are the data collection issue. Data collection, because the Madagascar coast is a long one, 5,600 quadra-kilometer, more than 3,000 fishing communities. So data collection remains a huge point, a huge. Despite we have already contacted a lot of partners, WWF, Balobi from South Africa, and for the action plan that is optimizing this CRC collection, and also giving in time data to help the decision makers when it comes to the stock assessment for the implementation of the management tools. And also have a challenge, the climate change, with all the climate risks, because as you know, and it has been touched by a cyclone impacted, that has been called the Gamand, that has flooded the northern part of Madagascar. Unfortunately, when the cyclones go by, of course, we have a lot of damages, and these damages have been assessed at $676 USD, millions of USD, and this is part of the fisheries, are part of the most of. We have fish that died floating above the water, because we had the reduction of the salinity, and that was a result of the death of many resources, fish, octopuses, shrimps, name them the species, and this does impact on the quantity of the production of this year. So in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, today I would wish to recommend to all the brother countries in Africa to implement these voluntary guidelines of FAO, despite the fact that even if it's all about voluntary, it's a voluntary basis, because I am testimonying, as a Minister of Fisheries and Blue Economy of Madagascar, I can see the advantages and the assets to have implemented these voluntary guidelines in Madagascar. And not only we are making headways, we are winning the trust of the stakeholders, but enables us also to have very good tools, right, on the governance of fisheries, even the governance itself of all other components of the blue economy. And of course, it is an invite, it is a recommendation as well, if you enable me, because Madagascar today is part of the leading countries in Africa in terms of governance of fisheries. Speaking about fight against IUU fisheries, for instance, yeah, before we used to have only 2 boats in Madagascar. We have 25 of surveillance in Madagascar. We have troubled to have fuel. We have 1 billion of budget for the fuel. So it's about 250,000 or 300,000 USD per year for the fuel. And all of this is thanks to the implementation of the voluntary guidelines. And we have been able to achieve. And we have been able to develop partnership with a great number of stakeholders that have supported us, and to be able to reach the expected level of fisheries management. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for your lovely attention. Your Excellency, thank you so much for this very rich presentation. We are learning a lot from you, sir, on Madagascar, on the activities that are carried out, and on the expected outcomes and fulfilled. We do retain, Your Excellency, that to implement the voluntary guidelines, for us to have that, we need to have a political will. And for this, we need to be convinced, and this is key, and you have insisted on that from the beginning. And because it is an instrument that is dedicated to small-scale fisheries and based on the human rights, as a result of a governance, ideal governance tool. I think through the examples you have been able to share, success stories, and also the challenges to overcome, we do retain that the implementation of the voluntary guidelines and enabled to win the trust of the stakeholders. And this is highly important, be it internally or externally or bilateral cooperations, and that helped you to make headways and also to play on transparency. And by publishing your first report, FITI report, by publishing the fishing permits, etc., etc., you have also focused on the fact that, Your Excellency, the situation of the climate change of your country facing climate change and the various damages that the cyclone has caused recently, and all the ramifications as a result. And your recommendations are focusing on the need, calling from the bottom of your heart of countries to be able to follow the footsteps of Madagascar and to implement the voluntary guidelines, because we have a lot of advantages that you can draw from. Many speakers and many followers are asking questions. The questions will be after the four presentations, and we are going to take questions and in bench of five, to enable the various panelists to be able to react. Thank you, Your Excellency. Despite the very late hour, I think that you are going to stay on by the hand to be able to answer to a couple of questions focusing on Madagascar. The last but not the least speaker, Madam Rena Westland from the FAO, who is going to come back to a couple of questions regarding the assets of the 10 years from the adoption of the VGs. The FAO has been able to do to support the stakeholders, the major challenges, and also the ways forward in terms of implementation. Madame, the floor is all yours.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Modérateur.
Thank you so much, Mr. Facilitator,
for having invited me to this webinar. I feel honored to be among these very distinguished panelists, and it's been a pleasure to hear what they have had to say about the small-scale fisheries guidelines. These guidelines are very close to my heart, and I have been part of them, and they have been part of me maybe for quite a while. They're celebrating 10 years this year, but the work started, of course, before that, with a lot of engagement of small-scale fishers and fish workers around the world. As our facilitator said, I've been giving a few questions, and I will try to answer them. And the first one has to do with what achievements we see since the guidelines came into being then 10 years ago. And one achievement happened in a way almost or just before the guidelines were even formally endorsed, and that was the inclusion by the African Union of reference to the small-scale fisheries guidelines in the policy framework and reform strategy for fisheries and aquaculture in Africa. This shows, of course, a very important alignment between African regional policy and the global level policy framework. Also, regarding regional level support from the African Union, and of course with the always very important support by small-scale fishers and fish workers themselves, there was the creation of non-state actor platforms that were also pulled into becoming a continental platform, the AfriFishNet. This complements then organizations like CAOPA, and the wish from the African Union to keep consulting with fishers in Africa on issues that concern them, I think is very important, and something that is, of course, strongly promoted by the small-scale fisheries guidelines. In this context, there was also the establishment of the Women's Network, Women and Trade and Fisheries Network, the AfriFishNet, that has grown over the years with many national chapters, but then also united in this Pan-African network. I think the role of women in small-scale fisheries is something we still need to promote more and recognize better. So the creation of our fishnet, I think, is an important step in that direction. There are also other sub-regional examples of policy and institutional achievements. In the Mediterranean, the General Fisheries Commission for the Mediterranean, the GFCM, helped promote and have a regional plan of action for small-scale fisheries endorsed in 2018. And this, of course, includes the African states on the southern shore of the Mediterranean. We have the CCAF, the Fishery Committee for the Eastern and Central Atlantic, that has a working group on artisanal fisheries. This existed also earlier, but it's been revived with the support of the Small-Scale Fisheries Guidelines. And more recently, the Southern African Development Community, SADC, have held discussions on developing a regional plan of action for the implementation of the Small-Scale Fisheries Guidelines. So I think these are several examples of where there are achievements on the policy level, at the regional and sub-regional policy levels. This is the first step. The important thing is, of course, to have the guidelines also implemented at the ground. And this may be more of a challenge, but something we're moving towards. And referring then to my second question, FAO has provided support, but always working in partnership with small-scale fishers and their organizations and governments. Nothing will happen just by one organization moving ahead. It's really a question of working together. So we have had the opportunity to support various activities through projects that we have had in turn funding from Sweden and Norway to implement in several of the African countries. And I know the national plans of actions for small-scale fisheries have been mentioned. And this is something that we are very happy to have been able to support. And I think you have mentioned 5 countries, but there are actually also a 6th one. Uganda has also developed a national plan of action. In addition to this, and more specifically again on women, we have also been able to support women in post-harvest, in the post-harvest sector, and also some of the further development of the Our Fishnet chapters in different countries that I just mentioned. With regard to knowledge and data and so on small-scale fisheries, so that was something that one of my fellow panelists mentioned, that this is a challenge and something that is lacking. FAO, together with Duke University and World Fish, carried out a study at the global level that we call the Illuminating Hidden Harvests. And that provides more information than was earlier available on the contribution of small-scale fisheries. And this contribution then is not only with regard to catches, but it also looks at the contribution of small-scale fisheries to employment and livelihoods, and to nutrition, and also, again, the important role of women. The study covered not all countries in the world, but there were many African countries that were part of this. And there is information now available on the African continent as such, and also on individual countries. I think my colleague Nicole, who is here, she put the Madagascar briefs building on the IHH, Illuminating Hidden Harvest, in the chat earlier, and we also have similar documents for a few other countries. Of course, there are challenges, and some have already been mentioned, so maybe I won't dwell on that too much. Also, I can see my time is running out. But the small-scale fisheries guidelines, they are in a way challenging themselves because they are complex. They are dealing with all different aspects of small-scale fisheries livelihood, which means that they have to have a very broad support and require really intersectoral collaboration, which can be a challenge in many countries. The different ministries may work quite separately. And when things go beyond fisheries itself, there are special challenges to be able to achieve what the small-scale fisheries guidelines recommend. Process is very important, and I already said that we need to work in partnership. The small-scale fishers and fish workers themselves are and should be in focus when we implement the guidelines. We need political will, and then we have challenges like climate change. That has also been mentioned. That is maybe a more difficult aspect to tackle, but that we need to think carefully about how we can deal with. And then a bit future looking on how we can continue implementing the guidelines, because even if they now celebrate 10 years, they are still very relevant and there's a need to continue promoting them. And there's a need, and this has already been mentioned by our Excellency the Minister of Madagascar, recommended that other countries also look at having national plans of actions or regional plans of actions for some of the organizations that then in turn can support countries to implement the guidelines. I think also, and this was also alluded to in the same context, to have experience sharing between countries and look at champions and what has worked and what we can implement that someone else has done already and been successful about. We need to continue engaging with partners and working together, and having small-scale fishers and fish workers organized, I feel, is very important, because this is an important pathway to making sure they have a voice in decision-making and in the continued implementation of the small-scale fisheries guidelines. And I'd like to congratulate CAOPA and other organizations that are taking such a strong role in this. With that, I would like to say thank you very much, and I look forward to the continuation of this discussion.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Raslan. Thank you so much for your for this very brilliant presentation that shapes up a couple of elements, especially on what FAO has been able to carry out and achieve so far. Maybe the time of intervention didn't allow you to cover everything. We do understand that, but you have touched key elements, yeah, and namely all the influence that the adoption of the voluntary guidelines has had on the political framework, the political influence at the level of African Union, at the level of the different organizations in the different regions. And as you made mention of, the voluntary guidelines themselves are a challenge. And I think that this is something that sounds and shared by everybody. And you have focused, insisted on the collaboration with the organizations and with the need of the development of action plans. And thank you very much for the information on Uganda as being the sixth country. We are going to add that to the list. Uganda on the list of the countries that have that has drafted also a action plan. The essential of information on studies that have been carried out, a couple of studies, and in the documents are available and shared and accessible as well. When it comes to the ways forward, you have insisted on the fact that the voluntary guidelines must always they remain relevant and that is very important. And you have joined His Excellency, Mr. the Minister, on the call and the recommendation made to the other countries to be able to develop action plans and then implement them. And so and implement the voluntary guidelines, but you have insisted on the fact that on the need of sharing outcomes, the need to be committed with the partners, with all the partners to be committed, including the national stakeholders, and to ensure that we organize the fishermen and fishing folks to help them to have a voice to be heard beyond its existence, to be a voice to be heard. We have concluded with the panelists, with the four panelists, ladies and gentlemen, that we have planned for. Now we have, let's move on to the questions and the queries. For now, we have registered two hands that are up, and we are going to give the floor to them. To Dr. Mustafa Dem, the floor is all yours, and then Mohammed Ali to be prepared. And we would like to ask the different speakers to ask concise questions, and if possible, and to name the person to whom and to help to manage time by being concise and very brief in 2 minutes for the questions. Mr. Dem, the floor is all yours. Thank you very much, Mr. Facilitator. Thank you so much to CAOPA for having organized this very important meeting, and I would like to congratulate all the panelists, all the speakers. A small notice that this question is to Mr. President Gausu, and I have the impression that we have a lack of development of synergy and efforts of capitalization for the implementation of the voluntary guidelines, despite the largest efforts. I think that it should be a collaborative approach. We have lost him. We must involve the other stakeholders. The other question is to our colleague from Dr. Please, we have not heard the rest of your question. We had a couple of issues. We lost you at the time. The hand of your question on the capitalization, we don't have. Can you come back to the question? My question is to know, it is a notice that I have made. I have noticed that we have a very low synergy development between all the stakeholders for the implementation of these voluntary guidelines. The second question is that I think we also have, I have the impression that there is a lack of effort to join efforts, join means, and for all the partners. We need to join hands, and everybody is working on each side. I think that we need to, there is a huge need of developing, of having have local resources, has shared His Excellency Mr. the Minister. I cannot understand that that the Senegal and have to have challenges to depend only on a project to be able to do the census and to be able to control its fishing efforts. It is misunderstandable. So we need to have human resources to be developed and also local resources, financial local resources that must accompany this implementation. This implementation of the voluntary guidelines should not only be the business of FAO or other partners. Great efforts must be taken up at the local level, as said His Excellency Mr. the Minister of Madagascar, and also to join all the initiatives, and all the means available, and to capitalize on the existence and to develop synergies. A small project of FAO, you have all the challenges just to raise funds, will never enable you to move forward. We need to have an effort of mutualization, the establishment and of local resources, and development of synergy between the different partners. And the last question that I would like to intervene is that this approach, the sectorial approach, is very limiting. We need to have a holistic approach that goes beyond fisheries to put forward environment, trade, and fundings. Thank you. Thank you very much, Doctor. These comments and then questions. The questions are noted. We'll give the floor to Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali, the floor is yours, sir.
Yes, Excellence.
Mohamed Ali, si vous pouvez vous présenter.
Mohamed Ali, can you introduce yourself, sir, and speak closer to the mic?
Vous avez fermé votre micro, monsieur.
You have muted your micro, please. Unmute yourself, introduce yourself, and speak. No, we can't hear you.
Okay. Now?
Now, fine.
Okay, you hear me now?
Very well.
Okay, thank you, moderator Dr. Mbao, for CAOPA organization for this afternoon. Good evening, good afternoon, everywhere you are, Your Excellency, ministers who are in the channel of this Zoom meeting, dignitaries, other fishery experts, directors, and other local organizations who are potential in the African continent. I would like to say good afternoon, good everyone, everywhere you are. It's mine is a contribution, just only as a contribution, and that is contribution is to translate for SSF guideline as a national level. We already discussed in the FAO these issues, and we never get responded still yet. So in order to make a realization for small-scale fisheries guideline to be implemented in the field level, or government policies also can endorse. We need to translate for it's a local language. Then that local language to distribute. Then go to distribute. Everybody can understand. We are going to distribute all the copies to the communities, to the stakeholders, to the fishers, to follow this guideline. So this guideline, it should be domesticated in the field level, not only for top and hub and high level. That is one of my contribution. So in order to make this a continental approach for smaller scale fisheries, what I would like to suggest here, African Union, also they have a role to contribute about these issues. Sensitive issues is a continental issues, that African Union also to intervene this matter, because I was witness 2015 when FAO has been launching the SSF guideline in Central Eastern and Southern Africa region in Addis Ababa. I was a witness. I was the one who presenting about the overview of the Somali fisheries status. Actually, I'm sorry, I'm a former Minister of Fisheries and Blue Economy of Federal Government of Somalia. I'm a senior technical fishery officer, and also now I'm working for the Department of Aquatic Species and Marine Conservation. That is a generally. So in order to make realization, I would like to comment here. Let this CAOPA organization to organize this, in-person forum to discuss more about how we are going to form for African Union or to head a state to endorse these small-scale fisheries to domesticate in generally as well. Thank you very much.
Merci, Mohamed Ali, Ministère des Pêches.
Thank you very much for the Minister of Fisheries of Somali, Blue Economy. Thank you very much on the primordial role to be given to the African Union, and also to make it a continental matter, and requesting CAOPA to organize an in-person meeting to discuss further. So let's move on to Mr. Haruna Debai, who raised also the hand. Over to you, Haruna. Good morning, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Can you hear me loud and clear? Yes, we can hear you. Can you introduce yourself before you go on? My name is Haruna Debai. I'm the president of artisanal fisheries at the Nouadhibou in Mauritania. I am also a friend and a collaborator of CAOPA. We have worked together on many topics. I am very, very delighted to be part of this very useful webinar that has been that is here and trying to assess the 10 years of anniversary of the voluntary guidelines. I would like to thank Gausu for this very important introduction. I would like to comment His Excellency, from his presentation, focused on the reason why we have developed these voluntary guidelines and why should we implement them. I think he has been very outstandingly clear. Can we mute? Thank you. There is somebody speaking, yeah? Go ahead. Only that in the framework of the assessment of all the African countries have been able to react and facing these voluntary guidelines, you have named, we have 5 and 6 countries in addition to Uganda, according to our dear officer from FAO, and she reminded us that we have Uganda. It's only the 6 countries that have been able to develop action plans for the implementation of the VGs. I think in Mauritania, we have considered these voluntary guidelines as being our resource management guidelines, management guidelines. In terms of transparency, we are at the origin of the Fiji initiative establishment. We are at our 4th report. I think in terms of small-scale fisheries protection, we have done a great job. We have made very important steps. We have been able to protect our octopuses and also particularly the octopus concert for the Mauritania, and we have given priority to the small-scale fisheries to protect this important activity, and that is feeding small-scale fishermen. And we have lately, and we have developed a development plan, management plan of small-scale fisheries, and also we have promoted the small-scale fisheries because it helped us to work in protected areas and that are not very far and far from the coast. I think that in a very general way, we need to review the way of assessing the reception of voluntary guidelines by different countries. Some have created and proposed action plans, and then others had over considerations, over ways of proceeding. And we have something to add also. CAOPA did not anticipate on this assessment to create in a general way to have an observatory within CAOPA to have the degrees of implementation, to see how each country is reacting to these voluntary guidelines. And I think that we have an essential point that is in line with the anniversary for the next summit, fisheries summit on the small-scale fisheries in Italy, in Rome, organized by FAO. We have not spoken about the land tenure, and it is a very important thematic to be given focused. I think at the level of Africa, we have shortcomings in some countries like Ghana, Guinea-Conakry, the Republic of Guinea. I don't know why you have not tried to focus on this issue also of land tenure in this webinar, because it seems to be very important as well. Thank you, dear President Haruna Lebey from Mauritania. Nwadibu, we have taken very good notes of your comments, the way that we need to proceed to assess what is being done. And maybe in some countries we are speaking about action plans. In others, other actions have been undertaken, promoting small-scale fisheries, action initiatives are being undertaken, and also this is something of huge importance to be focused upon. And we also have this need, this call to have an observatory. If CAOPA had created an observatory, maybe the assessment of the level of implementation could have been much more facilitated. And finally, I think you have mentioned the land issue, Let's give the floor to Madam Jelikatu Sherif, please. This is the first lady speaking after Madam Westlund to ask a question. She priority to be given to the woman as Mr. Omar Jami is getting ready, and then we are going to answer to the first bunch of questions. Jelikatu, please.
Hello?
Can you hear me, please? Yes, we can hear you. You have 2 minutes, please. Good evening to everybody. Thank you very much, Mr. Facilitator, and to all the colleagues of small-scale fisheries. My question is to all the speakers, panelists, given the voluntary guidelines must interest us, we the professionals and the small-scale and administration. Administration is very slow, and countries are very different. Implementation is also different. I would like to ask from the countries that have developed the voluntary guidelines, what are the strategies you have used to get these voluntary guidelines to be known to the small-scale fishermen? It is true, what has been the dissemination plan before implementing the voluntary guidelines? We need to get to know them, because I know from my viewpoint, when every political administrator will get to know the voluntary guidelines, they must struggle to ensure their implementation to be used as we expected, because it is for the profit of everybody. That is my question. What are to all the panelists, what are the strategies to ensure the ownership and ensure the dissemination of voluntary guidelines, to ensure that all the administration and the fishing force to get to know the content of the voluntary guidelines before getting into implementation? Thank you so much. Good morning and good evening to all the ladies from Guinea-Conakry also. Let's give the floor to Mr. Omar Jau. 2 minutes as well. Hi, I hope that you can hear me loud and clear. Yes. Can you hear me? Yes, we can hear you, sir. Thank you to everybody. Hi to his president of CAOPA, Gausugay, and to all the people who are here by present. I think that I would like to start by introducing myself. My name is Marjao. I'm the national president of community-based radios. It is an association that brings together all the facilitators doing fisheries activities. The CPCG, it is thanks to CAOPA. It is thanks to CAOPA that CAOPA helped us to establish these community radios, the Association of Community Radios in Senegal. And I can say that I have here the intervention of Mr. President. I had the intervention of Madam Westlund, from Madam Gay as well, from the Maritime Department. We, the facilitators, we are the first stakeholders that have benefited from technical support, training support on the voluntary guidelines. But only one training, on training workshop on the voluntary guidelines is very tiny, is very small. And the first thing that I have answered when he used to speak about voluntary guidelines, I said that we are broadcasters. We need to be trained before giving us and if we don't have any way of getting to the voluntary guidelines, how can we disseminate the voluntary guidelines? How can we share the information on the voluntary guidelines? And it is in that view that CAOPA has given us, provided a training on the voluntary guidelines. It was very interesting, by the way, very interesting. And it's the opportunity to say very big thank to CAOPA that has initiated this training. But one training is not enough. Me as a radio officer is not enough. Only one training is not enough to get to know all the ins and the outs of the voluntary guidelines. But I would like to add also that in the president of professional organizations or the leaders of fishing communities, it's not enough that these people get to know a little on the voluntary guidelines. I would like to draw your attention on the fact that if ever we want these voluntary guidelines to be taken, to be owned, and to be useful to the small-scale fishery sector, we need to inject funds, because the stakeholders to support and implement these voluntary guidelines, these are people who are at the grassroots level. And to get to the stakeholders at the grassroots, Madam Gay made mention about CAOPA has injected funds for the dissemination of voluntary guidelines about broadcasting in Sali, in Bur, in Capscreen, in Kafountine, in Joal, many other areas, but it's not enough. I would like to conclude, as I don't have that much time, I would like to conclude on this. I have here that we have done the assessment of the voluntary guidelines, right? But I cannot understand if today a stakeholder, one thing on the voluntary guidelines is thanks to CAOPA, but I think that I cannot understand how can we do the assessment of voluntary guidelines. I don't know. CAOPA has been involved or not, but we as stakeholders that are the first stakeholders to be informed on the voluntary guidelines, we have not been involved in that. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Zhao. The rules are made to be implemented. We had retained at the beginning 5 speakers, 5 questions. Let's answer to the first bunch before moving on to the second one. So questions also in the chat, but the people who ask these questions have not prepared precise to whom and to whom we need to. The people who ask the question in the chat, please tell us to whom the question is to. Otherwise, we are going to ask them, and then it will be up to the panelists to answer to the questions as we ask them. Let's move. Let's start now. Mr. President Gausu, for the question, but to be very brief, please, on some aspects and the question, because we had more comments than questions. Mr. President Gausu, over to you, sir. Thank you so much, Ngai. Let's start with to thank the people who asked the questions, especially to Dr. Mustafa. Then he is completely true. We need to try to do how do we capitalize on what has been done. So we are thinking about that. So of course, one of the reasons why we have organized this webinar to see what will be the next steps to be undertaken for the globalization, and also for the we are going to ask the support of Mustafa and then others in other experts that are in other countries, as I said in my speech, in collaboration with CAOPA and also with FAO, Regional Africa, because we are speaking about Africa, of course, in Rome as well. Just to assure you, Mr. Dem, we are working on this observatory, and also he also raised a very important question on the intersectoriality at the institutional level. I remember when we developed the action plan of the Senegalese in Senegal, the ministers that he mentioned were member of the steering committee, but in our countries we understand, we know we have challenges to link to join the institutions and work with them. The idea of the guidelines was there. That's why we have taken good note, and we are going to carry out working up on that one. What Harun also said is well understood. Yeah, we have taken very good note, and we are going to see what will be the step forward, and to see that for Jelly we have organized a workshop as we done in Senegal, in Cote d'Ivoire, but it is the administration that was committed in working with the professionals to develop an action plan and disseminate the voluntary guidelines. And CAOPA was supposed to facilitate with the FAO to see how this action plan will be implemented. But unfortunately, never had we had the opportunity to get a feedback from Guinea-Conakry. Now, CAOPA and at the continental level as well, we have members of CAOPA that are at the level of the countries. These organizations as well must take ownership of these guidelines of what we are doing, also to be able to materialize that on the ground, and also to reach out to the grassroots. And as a result, as always, we need to have organizations, strong organizations, dynamic organizations, and able to make proposals. We did not wait for FAO or the ministries on the 10 years to come and then propose. No, we have taken initiatives with all the team of CAOPA to come to this webinar because we understand the importance of the voluntary guidelines. That's the what I had to say, but just to maybe I will come back to the call to action. It has been translated in 7 languages. I will come back to the 5 high priorities of the call to action. Thank you so much, Guy. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you. I don't know if you have any comments, because we don't have questions, precise questions, just notices and comments. Do you have any comments on what you have heard? Madam Gay on the means, if you can tell us, Madam Gay, Mrs. Gay. I will finish with His Excellency with all of these examples of Madagascar, of all how in a country we can come to mobilize all the stakeholders, and also to mobilize, raise funds, local funds raised by Dr. Dem. So the 3, Madam Gay, on what you have here. Thank you so much. Thank you to Mr. Dem for this question. And as you know, of course, we have local resources that are provided in the framework of an investment consolidated budget, but the resources are not always enough, and the authorities are very interested in conducting the census, and this is meant to be done. But the budget line provided for this was very small. We had challenges developing synergies and to conduct the census on the small-scale fisheries and industrial fisheries. But we still have fundraising issues, and that delayed the implementation of this activity, so to speak. And when it comes to the question of Madam Haidara from Guinea-Conakry, for what is the dissemination strategy of voluntary guidelines in Senegal, we have used as a dissemination initiative. We have used the local broadcasting channels, radios, designing brochures, and also the translation of the content of the voluntary guidelines in national language in Wolof to ensure its better ownership of the communities.
Thank you.
Thank you so
sur la manière dont on peut porter une victoire.
Go ahead, yeah.
Sorry, yes, no, there was some interference. Now, maybe just a quick comment from my side as well, when it comes especially to the awareness raising and the need that small-scale fishers and fish workers know the small-scale fisheries guidelines to be able to use them and act on them, and I couldn't agree more. But it's also difficult because, as you know, there are many small-scale fishers and fish workers. And as FAO, we try to do as much as we can, but I would also like to call on all of you to help with this awareness raising and dissemination, to speak to people. If you know the guidelines, speak to other people who don't know them, etc. I think we really need to help each other to disseminate the guidelines properly. Having them in different languages is, of course, very important. And I think they now exist in about 20 languages that are also available on the FAO website. This is, of course, not at all enough. But in some cases, we have had countries or a group of people or an organization that have taken their own initiative to translate them into their language, and then FAO has helped to get them published and the final steps. So don't feel shy to go ahead and translate or do pieces of awareness raising, all of you. I think this is what we need if we're going to spread the message properly. Thank you.
Merci Lena pour ce commentaire.
Thank you so much, Lena. Let's give the floor to Your Excellency to react on the intervention of Dr. Dem regarding the fundraising at the local level, the political commitment, etc., to be able to implement them, and also a question raised, a comment that has been raised by our colleague from Somali, the role of the African Union in doing that regarding the adoption and the implementation of the voluntary guidelines. Your Excellency, the floor is yours. Thank you so much for having given me the floor, Mr. President. In fact, in the case of Madagascar, I will try to answer. I have seen the comment with the questions in the chat. I dare to say that everything is based on the will as a leader and to brighten, to share good governance in your sector, in your country. In Madagascar, we have known problems of governance within the fishery sector 5-8 years ago. That's the reason why I personally, from the civil society, we have wanted to change the history, to change the fishery sector. The reason why we have committed ourselves for the implementation of the voluntary guidelines in Madagascar. So first of all, it is a matter of personal will, individual will. Are you convinced as a Minister of Fisheries? Are you? Do you have all the I will say the convictions to convince your colleagues and also etc. etc. I completely agree also with the holistic approach, lack of holistic approach. Of course, I have taken good note of, and also this is what has been done, implemented, yeah, in Madagascar, right? So regarding the strategies to disseminate the voluntary guidelines in Madagascar, what have been the initiatives? First of all, we have we called upon FAO to give us copies, physical copies of documents, physical documents on the voluntary guidelines that we have disseminated and to all the stakeholders. That was an approach, stakeholder-based approach. And then we have engaged, we have committed the stakeholders themselves to share the document, the information, the content of the voluntary guidelines with the fishery via our regional directors within the regions, coastal regions of Madagascar. In addition to all of that, we have also organized meetings, workshops on the small-scale fisheries, and at each opportunity, we have always shared, we have always pinpointed the need to implement the SSF guidelines, but also the role that each of us should be playing and to be able to succeed in the implementation of these voluntary guidelines. Now, when it comes to the role of African Union and IBAR is a tool, and each of the countries should be going toward AU IBAR, not IBAR to come to us. We have 54 countries, and AU IBAR is trying to support for our case, Madagascar. We have been supported at least 6 times or 7 times by the IUBAR in the development of many documents, governance tools, so on and so forth. And to keep the line and on the voluntary guidelines of the small-scale fisheries. And this is how do I answer in a very natural way to the various questions. But once again, as I said, it is a matter of a personal will. Are you, as a minister, as a leader, are you convinced that of the goods of the voluntary guidelines? Over to you. Thank you, Your Excellency. I think well said. It is very well precise, the personal commitment the personal will, the political will, and to be a priority. This is key to be able to do something in this area. So we are, let's take the second bunch. We have only a couple 20 minutes, just 20 minutes to wrap up and to move on. I would ask if there is the next speakers to be very precise if you're on the question and to whom the question is meant. If it is a comment, just tell us that it is a comment and then we register as a comment, please. The floor is to Sidi Ahmed Bey from Mauritania. Thank you very much. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for being, I was with a mission of Ministeria just to have an action plan for the small pelagics in the country. This took time. I would like to raise out, of course, Mauritania. He has done very important things in fight of against fish meal, meant
très important. Tout d'abord. Oui. Donc, tu m'écoutes, mon ami interprète du Mali, ça va? Bon, c'est-à-dire qu'on a commencé à faire
we have started started reducing the fish meal production up to 90% today to do away and to move on to the human consumption by going via freezing and the processing unit to be sent to Mauritania, because we have a plan by giving them with low price, and also moving on. Think about Africa. If you take on the 23, the third of the exportation was meant for Africa. These are African markets, be it Burkina Faso, in Cote d'Ivoire, be it in Senegal. So this is very important, because for us, the small pelagics make up the resource for the future. This resource must be protected and meant for the human consumption instead of using it for to feed over species. Because as we stand, we don't have the means to make use of that. So we have taken this decision by promoting, and we have small fishermen that are working on that issue. We had this canoe-based fishing activity. We have the coastal canoes, more than 400 fishing boats. It has been a huge success. Yeah. We have trouble getting you, Mr. President. We really have trouble.
L'essentiel est compris et noté sur l'importance.
This is meant on the importance of that you are doing in Mauritania for the protection of small pelagics, yeah, and to ensure that to secure human food security, and to this small pelagic not to disappear, and to meant for the production of fish meal, etc., etc. I think for time issues and sound quality, we are going to give the floor to Mr. Asandem by asking it to be concise, as well as a journalist to be much more precise and concise. Asandem, the floor is yours. Thank you very much. Good afternoon to all of you guys. Thank you to different panelists for the relevance of your interventions. Thank you to my Gang for the good communication, coordination of this meeting, but very interesting regarding what we are expecting from the small-scale fisheries. My name is Asandem. I'm a journalist from the National Federation of Senegalese Journalists. I'm Secretary General of ICPCJ, for President Omar Jao, and our objectives is to contribute to the promotion of a sustainable, responsible fisheries. I have one question that I'm going to divide into two for Gausu and FAO to CAOPA that has a social incurring in fisheries since six.
Refermez votre micro, s'il vous plaît. Voilà, je disais que la CAOPA qui a
I was saying that to CAOPA that has a social incurring in the fisheries sector has been working since its inception to help develop and train a lot of journalists in Africa, including myself. Many stakeholders in the Africa media have benefited from training sessions thanks to CAOPA. The communication being at the beginning, at the end of all the development process. Which role do you give to the communicators, to the journalists, to help them in disseminating these voluntary guidelines? I don't doubt they will contribute to helping our leaders in going toward a sustainable fisheries to everybody. So this same question is to FAO. I would like to ask it to my friend from FAO. 10 years after the development of the voluntary guidelines, is FAO planning to involve more major officers to be able to help disseminate these voluntary guidelines and to help the journalists play the key role in disseminating the voluntary guidelines and in reaching out to the target groups? Thank you very much for your rapt attention. Thank you, Hassan. You have been very precise. Thank you. The floor is to Madam Reisa Ladesh. Reisa. Madam Reisa Ladesh. Reisa. Hi. According to the countries where you are, Raisa Nadesh from Ivory Coast. I would like to greet everybody. I will be very quick. As said, at the level of Ivory Coast, my country, we had a lot of attempts and then activities when it comes to the dissemination of the voluntary guidelines. We had a lot of workshops with these workshops has resulted into the development of this is a guide that we have, illustrated guideline. We have this chapters number 6, the chapter 7, and the chapter number 8, and a guide, illustrated guide as it is being outlined with as it's being presented, with the chapters. And we have an issue of means to disseminate, because but efforts are made here and there to be able to disseminate the voluntary guidelines, but we still need resources to do that. We don't have enough resources to do that. In addition to that, the National Federation Fenastopsy has also organized workshops to be able to disseminate with the meager resources that we have and to train members of the Federation on the voluntary guidelines. Now, my question is to come. My question goes to the representative of FAO. Dear Mrs. Westland, at the level of the gender approach for the women, we had a lot of projects, common projects that have been developed via each country regarding the voluntary guidelines on the gender approach. I know in my country we had project like the improved oven, FTT improved ovens, and these ovens have been established in other countries. But I would like to know if has there been any monitoring of this project? Did you conduct any assessment? What are the outcomes of this assessment? What has been established to improve this project and this to improve to solve the problems? Has there been any monitoring, any assessments? Have you assessed the project to see if it really helped the women? This is my question to you, dear representative of FAO. Over to you, Mr. Facilitator. Let's congratulations for this illustrated guide, and efforts are still being made to ensure that means and I do there that this will be local means in priority to be able to disseminate that one. And so the question that has been raised to Lena, I think has been well noted, Lena. Let's give the floor to Madam Adama. That is the last to ask a question, and we are going to conclude in the 10 minutes to come to give the floor to the panelists, but also to Dr. Njagage, who just get to connected and who participated to all these projects and process to be among the supporters of CAOPA in this work. Antonio Jallo. The floor is all yours, dear. From Guinea-Bissau.
Le micro, Adama. Presidente de Rede de Minguez de Guiné-Bissau. Vice-coordenador CAOPA. Em palavras concretas, e só para poder reforçar, maneira de chegar o Zé do Papacá, que tem muita coisa que me
Stand by for the Portuguese translation.
Não tempo limitado, não aproveitar a voz.
Muito boa tarde. Boa tarde. Chamo-me Papacá.
As she said, as she said, we can hear you, Alfo. Go ahead, please, yeah.
Oui, mais il ne nous reste pas beaucoup de temps. On a 10 minutes.
We don't have that much time, please. We have only 10 minutes to go, please. Can you go ahead, please?
On a quelques difficultés avec nos collègues de la...
We have some challenges with the colleagues of Guinea-Bissau, so Alfo. I would like to thank CAOPA for this initiative, and for me, this organized in Dakar. It helped us to help us, and also to help us focus on the organizations and the training that we got on these voluntary guidelines, including Guinea-Conakry. And I was with Adama Jallo.
Na sentido de se divulgação na Guiné-Bissau.
S'il vous plaît, Alfou, s'il vous plaît, tout le monde est actuellement déconnecté. C'est Alfou. Est-ce que Alfou est là pour parler directement?
Alfou, can you speak French or what is going on? Because we can't get any translation.
Est-ce que vous... Oui?
Sim, CAOPA não aconteceu com o apoio de CAOPA na divulgação na Guiné-Bissau de diretrizes. Porque não tem um código de conduta de uma pesca responsável de FAO que é divulgado pouco na Guiné-Bissau. E esse código, se você tem a oportunidade de olhar o que está
And
na...
we got don't have, and that is not disseminated in Guinea-Bissau.
Quer atores, quer parte do governo sobre gestão sustentável.
And we are committed, yeah, and we're going to approaching the authorities and the fishermen and also the voluntary guidelines. It is an instrument that must be known by all the sector and also to be able to go to meet. And so we rely on CAOPA to be able to achieve that one. We had approaches, we have contacted the authorities, FAO, and so that's the reason why we would like to call on CAOPA to be able to influence and to be able to capitalize, to do things that will help us to get these guidelines disseminated. And thank you very much. Your call is here now. The challenges, and then we expected a precise question. These are comments on your challenges. I think that the president will come back to that. Now we have only 7 minutes. 7 minutes to go to wrap up and to give some speakers. Let's move on. Give the floor to Dr. Njagage and to the different speakers and to wrap up this session very quickly and in time. Thank you. Dr. Njagage, the floor is all yours, sir. Thank you so much, my dear facilitator. I hope that I have voluntarily put out the video. I am in Accra since 12. We are in we have a lot of rain coming in Ghana and Lena was there has said and to give a strong message of FAO. Thank you so much for being here, Lena. I would like to acknowledge also the presence of His Excellency Madagascar Robert, and a true defender of the cause the small-scale fisheries and CAOPA for this initiative, for today. And to conclude, to say as follows: the implementation of the voluntary guidelines is the business of all. Everybody should be involved, and all of us will benefit from us at the level of the FAO regional office, and that is FAO at the global level. We are ready, and we are ready to carry on supporting the initiatives of various shareholders, starting with the professional organizations, and to ensure that the implementation of these voluntary guidelines not to be something that is slogans, but something that is that hits the eyes. FAO doesn't support, and the FAO accompanies the countries. FAO, by accompanying the countries, will accompany the professional organizations. We are here to serve you guys, and I would like it to be clear and net. We are behind you because the means that we are raising are your means and must come back to you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Gay, for this precise comments, very precise, and the importance of the voluntary guidelines, right? And the business of all, and all together we benefit from it. And recalling to the minds that the arrangements taken at the level of FAO to accompany, not to support, but to accompany. I think it is crystal clear, and here we have some colleagues who raised again their hands. Unfortunately, given the timing, you're going to accept and acknowledge that we want to be able to come back again on the questions anymore. Unfortunately, what we are going to do, let's give the floor to expert Sherif. I hope that he will be precise and synthetic before giving the floor to the different panelists for their closure remarks. Sheriff Jai. Thank you so much, Ngan. Thank you to everybody, to all the participants. Yeah, and I'm very delighted, yeah, to of this webinar that is giving us the status stock taking, giving us the stock taking of the voluntary guidelines. Everybody acknowledges the importance of the voluntary guidelines, right? And on its inputs, on what they can bring about as a benefit in the sustainable development of small-scale fisheries everywhere this being done and in the world, particularly in Africa. But we also have in this notice and we have lack of ownership of these voluntary guidelines, right? By all the stakeholders and including the first leader of the countries, member countries of FAO that have signed them, but also the professionals also. They still need to take ownership of this document and the beneficiaries the voluntary guidelines in the framework of the improvement of their living and existent conditions if the principles are implemented. The notice being meant, and everybody agrees that there is a lack of ownership. So now we need to move on to that and to imagine, to draft a strategy to relaunch, to trigger again and rekindle the implementation of the voluntary guidelines in Africa and in the continent, because it is a continent where we have possibilities of sustainably developing the sector. And in this framework, I think that we need to make in the framework of the strategies, we need to have a larger dissemination and of these voluntary guidelines and the actual implements and of stakeholders. And the first one, the state that must be making decisions and the realities of the countries, and also regarding the principles and for the full implementation of the voluntary guidelines, and to have a monitoring system and assessment. And so, of course, and even regulations and monitoring has not been done. Jai, we cannot assess now to see the impact and to in the fisheries sector. Thank you very much, elder brother. Interpreters are here for 2 hours time now, and we are at the end. And in any case, all the contributions, be it via the chat or via the comments, you can raise them and send them to CAOPA and to be dealt with. So let's take now very quickly the President in 1 minute, His Excellency 1 minute, Lena FAO 1 minute, Madam Gay 1 minute, and Dauda Sen 1 minute, Secretary General. The President will be doing the conclusion on his behalf, and so for us to wrap up this webinar. The President, you have the floor. Thank you so much, Mr. Facilitator. I would like to recall to the minds that to say to Mr. Mohammed from Somali that Mr. Gay of the FAO Africa is here. I'm committed with CAOPA to see how do we organize a forum, the in-person forum that you have asked for. We are going to see in terms of strategies or possibilities, how do we do that with FAO, inshallah. And again, I would like to reiterate our availability to carry on working with the regional office in Africa of FAO based in Ghana, and for the good implementation and the good ownership taking of these voluntary guidelines. And as I said in my speech at the opening, now, as said, Sherif will be working for a good strategy to relaunch for the organizations and the states to take ownership of the VGs. And I would like to recall to the minds, as said Mr. Secretary General, on the call to action. Maybe we are going to have much more over time to come back. Thank you very much, Ngan, and all the best, especially Mr. His Excellency for his availability, because I know it is night in Madagascar, and he stayed with us on this event. Bless you. Thank you to FAO and to all the participants. Your Excellency, your final words. Your Excellency, thank you very much for having given the floor. I would like to reiterate my thanking to CAOPA, to the FAO, and to all the panelists, yeah, and for having shared with us the visions and their, I would say, their opinions on the implementation of the voluntary guidelines. And thank you to the participant for the questions, yeah, for the comments as well. And as I shared in the chat, the website of the Ministry of Fisheries and Blue Economy of Madagascar, I would like to invite you to consult regularly this website. And we are also on Facebook, and you can like it and then follow. Very sincerely, I would like to conclude by saying the voluntary guidelines of FAO, SF guidelines, is a tool of reference. It is a true source of inspiration and a tool of governance of small-scale fishery by excellency. And on these words, I would like to call on and recommend, if you allow me, to all the countries of Africa and to implement it, yeah, and to implement it in our various countries, and you are going to see the benefits, and many things will be changing. And not only the SSF guidelines, we also have the document, policy framework reform, African Union, IU-BAR, a document of reference that deserves to be used regarding the different strategies that we establish, and also the Malabo Declaration achievement implementation of 2004. This is a real mirror as a driver to drive the management, to lead the management. Thank you very much. I would like to thank dear Elder Jaga for these words, encouraging words of right now. And thank you, Lena. Thank you to everybody, and God bless you. Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Thank you so much. It has been a great pleasure. I think it is a pleasure that is shared, and a lot of comments for your personality in the chat concerning Madagascar, concerning your commitment, and you are appointed as a great champion in Africa, Your Excellency. And I think that and Madagascar and the other countries will be taking step in Madagascar, and other guidelines existing like the strategy reform and the land tenure guidelines. We have the African Union strategy reform document, reference document, well developed, well discussed, well furnished, and they just need to be implemented and to be applied so with all the stakeholders. I think we have taken very good notes, and on behalf of all the participants, we'll carry on and thanking you. And also we ask all the participants, yeah, to upload Your Excellency that is stayed with us very late. God bless you, Your Excellency. Thank you very much. I think that Lena, do you have any final words for us to wrap up?
Merci. Juste un mot aussi de ma part.
Just a word. I would like to thank CAOPA, all the panelists and all the participants. It has been a great pleasure to be with you this afternoon, and I have taken good notes of the comments and questions and the suggestions that have been made. And we are going to use all of this in the work in the future. I have I shared the website for the FAO website for the voluntary guidelines, and you can also look for documents, videos. We have a lot of beautiful things in there, and also many are in English, but we have other things in French and in other languages. I would like to call on you to explore, to dive, to tap into the resources existing at the FAO. Thank you very much again. Thank you. Thank you, Lena. Madam Gay, your final words. Thank you very much, Mr. Mbao. I'm very, very happy to have participated in this panel that is full of learnings, and then I have learned a lot. I would like to thank all the panelists and all the participants in Senegal. Whenever there is an opportunity, we are going to disseminate the SSF guidelines that can serve as an advocacy to the stakeholders. I would like to thank Mr. Gausugay and all his team. Thank you very much, and you stay safe, guys. Thank you very much. And I think that the only person, the most satisfied one, is I personally, and for having had this opportunity to be able to facilitate and to attempt to facilitate this such a beautiful workshop, this webinar, to mark the 10 years, celebrate the 10 years of the SSF guidelines. We'd like to thank the people who were online, people who sent the messages, but we would like to thank sincerely the interpreters that have enabled us, each of us, to be able to follow us, to understand and to listen to it. And a huge thank to all this beautiful team of interpretation and to all the partners who are behind this huge work that CAOPA is doing in collaboration with FAO. And to all of you, good evening, enjoy your nights, and good bless you. See you, inshallah, on next adventures and another. You need to say thank you yourself. You are one of the pillars of the CAOPA. The people say don't say it very much, but you are a pillar, outstanding man. And God bless you, sir. Everybody agrees with me. Yes. Thank you, Jaga. Thank you, guys, and see you. You completely agree. We completely agree. Thank you to you, Jaga. Thank you, guys.
Bravo, CAOPA. Bravo. Bravo, CAOPA.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Mpo.
Apprécié. Bravo,
bravo, bravo.
Considération.